There's a yellow box that used to mean everything: birthdays, anniversaries, apologies, love. For over a century, if you wanted to say something important without words, you bought Whitman's sampler. At their peak in the 1920s, Whitman's chocolates wasn't just dominating the American market, they were the American market. 40% of every boxed chocolate sold in this country came from one factory in Philadelphia. Over 2,000 skilled chocolatiers worked there, hand-dipping centers, crafting confections using recipes that hadn't changed in decades. Walk into any drugstore from Boston to Los Angeles, any department store, any corner shop, and there it was. That distinctive cross-stitch design, that promise of quality. Then corporate America got its hands on it. By the time Russell Stover was done gutting the company in the 1990s, nothing remained but a name. The Philadelphia factory, where generations of craftspeople perfected their art, demolished. The 2,000 workers, gone. The hand-dipped chocolates made with care, replaced by mass-produced candy stamped out in Kansas. In less than 2 decades, one of America's most beloved chocolate makers went from institution to zombie brand, a hollow shell trading on nostalgia while selling mediocrity. This is the story of how a Quaker confectioner built a chocolate empire from a single shop, how his family turned it into a national treasure, and how a series of corporate owners systematically destroyed everything that made it special. This isn't just about chocolate. This is about what happens when quarterly profits matter more than century-old promises, when efficiency experts replace master craftspeople, when a legacy gets sold to the highest bidder and stripped for parts. Welcome inside the rise and fall of Whitman's chocolate, where America's sweetest tradition was built by hand and destroyed by spreadsheet. Philadelphia, 1842. Stephen F. Whitman stands behind the counter of his modest shop at 1214 Market Street. He's 19 years old, a Quaker from a respectable Philadelphia family, and he's just opened a small retail confectionery in the heart of the city's commercial district. The shop is tiny, maybe 20 feet wide, squeezed between a dry goods store and a tailor. But Whitman sees something his competitors don't. Most confectioners in 1840s Philadelphia are importing European chocolates, marking them up, and selling them to wealthy customers. They're middlemen. Whitman wants to be a maker. He starts small, handmade chocolates, local ingredients when possible. He experiments with recipes, stays late into the night perfecting ganaches and pralines, tests different ratios of cocoa to sugar. The Quaker values his parents instilled honesty, quality, fair dealing. They're not just ethics, they're his business strategy. When a customer buys a Whitman chocolate, it tastes exactly like it should. No substitutions, no shortcuts. By 1850, Whitman's shop has expanded. He's not just selling candy anymore. He's importing fine teas, exotic fruits, specialty items you can't find anywhere else in Philadelphia. But chocolate remains his obsession. He studies European techniques, reads everything he can about cocoa cultivation, chocolate processing, the science of confectionery. While other candy makers are content copying old recipes, Whitman is innovating. Here's where the story takes an interesting turn. In 1854, Whitman makes a decision that will define his company for the next century. He starts packaging his chocolates in distinctive boxes, not generic containers, custom-designed boxes with his name prominently displayed. The packaging is almost as important as the chocolate inside. He understands something fundamental about human psychology. People don't just buy chocolate. They buy the experience, the presentation, the promise of quality. Sales climb. Whitman's reputation spreads beyond Philadelphia. By the Civil War, his shop is one of the most successful confectioneries in the city. Philadelphia, 1866. Stephen Whitman, now 43, makes the move that will transform his business. He relocates to a larger facility at 12th and Market Street and begins manufacturing chocolate on a larger scale. This isn't a small shop operation anymore. He's installing machinery, hiring skilled workers, creating a real factory. The timing couldn't be better. Post-Civil War America is hungry for luxury goods. The country is industrializing rapidly. Railroads are connecting cities. A new middle class is emerging with money to spend on treats that were once reserved for the wealthy. Whitman positions his chocolates right in that sweet spot between affordable and premium. But here's the thing about Stephen Whitman. He doesn't compromise on quality even as he scales up. While other chocolate makers are cutting corners, using cheaper ingredients, maximizing profits, Whitman is obsessed with consistency. Every batch is supervised, every recipe is followed exactly. The workers in his factory aren't just laborers. They're craftspeople, chocolatiers trained in traditional methods. By 1877, the Whitman facility employs over 200 workers and ships chocolates across the eastern United States. The yellow and brown boxes with Stephen F. Whitman and Son printed on them become familiar sights in shops from Maine to Virginia. Then, in 1888, Stephen Whitman dies at age 65. He's been in the chocolate business for 46 years. He never got to see what his son would build next. Horace Whitman takes over the family business in 1888 at age 36. He's worked alongside his father for years, learned every aspect of the operation, but Horace has his own ideas, bigger ideas. In 1890, he moves the company again, this time to a massive new factory complex in Philadelphia's industrial district. The building sprawls across multiple city blocks. It's state-of-the-art, with modern machinery, temperature-controlled rooms for chocolate tempering, specialized areas for different candy types. Over 600 workers clock in every day. Horace Whitman understands something his father was just beginning to grasp. Branding matters more than ever. In 1893, he creates what will become the company's signature product, the Whitman's Sampler. The concept is brilliant in its simplicity. A box containing a variety of chocolates, each piece identifiable by its shape or decoration, all wrapped in distinctive packaging. But here's what makes it genius. The cross-stitch design on the box lid, created by a local Philadelphia artist, makes it look like something grandmother would make, handcrafted, traditional, American. The Sampler launches in 1912, and within 3 years, it's everywhere. Department stores stack them near the cash registers. Drugstores display them in windows. They become the default gift for every occasion: birthdays, anniversaries, holidays, apologies, courtship. Think about that for a second. Whitman's doesn't just create a product, they create a ritual. The yellow box becomes part of American social fabric. By the 1920s, Whitman's has become the undisputed leader in American boxed chocolates. The Philadelphia factory now employs over 2,000 workers. Production runs 24 hours a day during holiday seasons. The company operates its own cocoa processing facility, its own packaging plant, even its own delivery fleet. The scale is staggering. At their peak in the late 1920s, Whitman's produces over 50 million pounds of chocolate annually. The Sampler alone accounts for 40% of all boxed chocolates sold in America. Walk into any Woolworth's, any Macy's, any corner drugstore, and there's the yellow box with the cross-stitch pattern. But here's what makes Whitman's special. They're still hand-dipping most of their premium chocolates. While competitors like Mars and Hershey are automating everything, Whitman's maintains a staff of skilled chocolatiers who dip centers by hand, decorate each piece individually, follow the same recipes Stephen Whitman perfected 80 years earlier. The company thrives through the Depression. While luxury goods collapse, Whitman's Sampler remains affordable enough that even struggling families can buy one for special occasions. It's a small indulgence, a touch of sweetness in hard times. During World War II, Whitman's shifts some production to military rations. The yellow box shows up in care packages sent to soldiers overseas. The company becomes even more woven into American life. By 1950, Whitman's controls nearly 35% of the boxed chocolate market. They're an institution. Then, in the 1950s and 60s, something shifts. Not obviously at first, just subtle changes in the market that Whitman's management doesn't quite register. Americans are starting to prefer lighter, sweeter candies. M and Ms. Reese's cups, Snickers bars. The old European-style chocolates that Whitman's specializes in, the heavy ganaches, the buttercreams, the fondants, they're starting to feel dated. Younger consumers don't have the same reverence for the yellow box their parents did. To someone born in 1945, Whitman's isn't exciting. It's what grandma gives you. It's old-fashioned. While Whitman's is maintaining their traditional methods, competitors are innovating. Russell Stover, a relative newcomer founded in 1923, is growing aggressively. They're using modern manufacturing techniques, experimenting with new flavors, marketing to younger demographics. Whitman's responds by doing more of what they've always done. They double down on tradition, on heritage, on the cross-stitch box. They run advertisements showing multi-generational families sharing samplers. A tradition since 1842. It works for a while. But beneath this success, something sinister is happening. Market share is eroding. From 35% in 1950 to 28% in 1960 to 22% in 1970. Still significant, but the trend is clear. In 1975, Whitman's Chocolates is still a major player, still profitable. But the Whitman family is tired. The business has been passed down through 4 generations. The current leadership is increasingly aware that the market is changing faster than they can adapt. 2 years later, in 1977, they make the decision that will ultimately destroy everything Stephen Whitman built. They sell the company to Pet Incorporated, a conglomerate that owns everything from food brands to insurance companies. The sale price is reported at around $60 million, a fortune. The Whitman family walks away wealthy. Pet Incorporated promises to maintain quality, to honor the Whitman tradition, to keep the Philadelphia factory running. For the first few years, they mostly do is production continues. The chocolatiers still hand dip. The yellow box still appears in stores, but corporate ownership brings corporate thinking. Pet executives look at the numbers and see inefficiency. Why employ 2,000 workers when automation could reduce that to 500? Why hand-dip chocolates when machines can do it faster and cheaper? Why maintain expensive Philadelphia real estate when you could relocate to a cheaper state with lower wages? The changes start slowly. First, they automate some of the simpler candies. Then they reformulate recipes to use cheaper ingredients. Then they start reducing the workforce. In 1986, Pet Incorporated sells Whitman's to another conglomerate. Then that company sells it to another. In less than a decade, Whitman's changes hands 3 times. Each new owner promises to preserve the legacy. Each one immediately starts cutting costs. By 1990, the Philadelphia factory workforce has been reduced to fewer than 800 workers. Half the hand dipping has been eliminated. The recipes have been modified repeatedly to save pennies per pound. Customers notice. The chocolate doesn't taste the same. The quality isn't there. Word of mouth spreads faster than advertising. Once bitten, twice shy. Sales decline further. Here's where it gets brutal. In 1993, Russell Stover Candies acquires Whitman's for an undisclosed sum, likely a fraction of what Pet paid 16 years earlier. Russell Stover already dominates the boxed chocolate market. They don't need Whitman's production capacity or Philadelphia factory. They want the brand name, the nostalgic recognition, the shelf space. The Philadelphia factory closes in 1996. Over a century of chocolate-making expertise gone. The 2,000 chocolatiers at their peak reduced to zero. The building that once hummed with activity 24 hours a day sits empty. Russell Stover moves all Whitman's production to their facilities in Kansas and Texas. They use their own recipes, their own manufacturing processes. The only thing that remains is the yellow box with the cross-stitch design. Everything else, everything that made Whitman special, is erased. Today, if you walk into a drugstore or supermarket, you'll still find Whitman's sampler. The yellow box is there, the cross-stitch pattern, the familiar name. Open it, and you'll find chocolates that taste nothing like what Stephen Whitman created. Nothing like what his son perfected, nothing like what made the brand legendary. They're Russell Stover chocolates in Whitman's packaging. Mass-produced, unremarkable. The kind of chocolate you buy when you need a generic gift and don't want to think too hard. The Philadelphia factory where it all happened? Demolished in 2007. The site is now a parking lot and a small retail development. There's no plaque, no memorial, nothing to indicate that one of America's great chocolate empires once stood there. From 2,000 skilled craftspeople to zero. From 40% market share to a zombie brand limping along on name recognition. From American institution to corporate afterthought. So, how does an empire built over 135 years collapse in less than 20? Lesson 1. Legacy is not a business strategy. Whitman's relied on their heritage, their tradition, their reputation. They believed customers would always choose them because of their history. But markets don't care about your legacy. Each generation of consumers makes its own choices. What impressed your grandparents means nothing to your grandchildren unless you give them a reason to care beyond nostalgia. While Whitman's was running advertisements about tradition since 1842, Russell Stover was creating new flavors, new packaging, new marketing campaigns targeting younger buyers. They were building their own tradition. Lesson 2: you can't preserve quality after you sell. The Whitman family took their money and left. What happened next wasn't their problem anymore. But here's the thing about selling a legacy company to a conglomerate. They didn't buy it because they loved chocolate. They bought it because they saw an asset they could exploit for profit. Every promise about maintaining standards, every assurance about preserving tradition, it was all negotiating language. Once the sale closed, the only thing that mattered was the spreadsheet. And on a spreadsheet, skilled chocolatiers hand-dipping candies look like an inefficiency to eliminate. Lesson 3. Automation isn't inherently bad, but soul matters. The mistake wasn't modernizing. The mistake was believing that Whitman's was just about chocolate. It wasn't. It was about craftsmanship, about the connection between maker and product, about the care that went into every piece. When you remove the craftspeople, when you relocate production to a generic facility, when you reformulate recipes for cost savings, you're not just changing processes. You're destroying the essence of what made the product valuable in the first place. Russell Stover makes perfectly fine chocolate, but it's not Whitman's. It never will be, and customers know the difference. Lesson 4. Some things shouldn't be optimized. Modern business thinking says everything should be measurable, improvable, optimizable. But some value exists in the inefficiency, in the human touch, in the refusal to take shortcuts. Whitman's competed for decades against bigger companies with more automation because they offered something those companies couldn't: authenticity. The knowledge that real people made this chocolate by hand, the same way it had been made for generations. Once that was gone, Whitman's was just another chocolate brand. And in a market full of chocolate brands, why choose the one trading on faded glory? Philadelphia, 2024. If you drive down Market Street today, there's no trace of Stephen Whitman's original shop. The Philadelphia factory complex where 2,000 workers once crafted chocolates by hand is a parking lot. The company that bore the Whitman name for over 180 years exists only as a label owned by a corporation that has no connection to the founder's vision, values, or craft. In Kansas and Texas, machines stamp out chocolates in yellow boxes with cross-stitch designs. They ship them to stores across America, where they sit on shelves next to dozens of other chocolate brands, differentiated only by price point and packaging design. The Whitman family is long gone from the business. The chocolatiers who spent years perfecting their craft are retired or dead, their skills unused, their knowledge lost. The recipes that made Whitman special are filed away in some corporate archive, replaced by formulas optimized for cost and shelf life. All that's left is a name, a ghost. A hollow brand that once meant something. From a single shop in 1842 to America's chocolate champion to a corporate asset stripped of everything that made it valuable. 154 years of building, 2 decades of destruction. The yellow box is still there, but the soul is gone, forever. Think about that the next time you see a Whitman sampler in a store. You're looking at a tombstone, a memorial to what happens when craft meets capitalism, when legacy meets leverage, when corporations convince themselves that brands are just intellectual property to be exploited rather than promises to be kept. Stephen Whitman built something beautiful. His son made it legendary. Corporate America turned it into a case study in how to extract every dollar of value from a name while destroying everything that gave it meaning in the first place. Welcome to Whitman's Chocolate, where Philadelphia's sweetest dream was crafted, celebrated, and systematically destroyed.